I'm Stila Webb.
And I'm Shuvom.
I'm going to write my first fiction novel this year.
And I'm going to film it.
And we're going to release one video each week.
And if you keep up with Stila's word count, by the end of 2017, you'll have... Alright, 10%ers. We're going to film in a different location today because one, it was too hot to film downstairs, and two, we really wanted tacos. Today we're going to talk about editing your book line by line and paragraph by paragraph.
Getting into the nitty gritty. Crinkle, 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 crinkle.
Ah, gotta move this down here. No one's gonna drink that. Oh, it's just dripping everywhere. It's dripping everywhere. It's getting dripped. Oh, it's getting. Oh. Ah! Ah! Okay, we're back. So, by now, you should have edited your big character arcs to make sure they pan out throughout your book.
My ears are good.
You should have edited your scenes to make sure each scene necessary to your book. Make sure it's carrying your own weight. Now we're going to go inside the scenes. We're going to go to paragraph and line by line editing.
So you should be in the process of all of this as you go through.
So what do you look for when you're editing line by line paragraph, Kitty? What's your biggest look?
Number one is always clarity. As we've said, clarity is king. If your readers don't know what they're reading, or they don't know what's happening, you've already lost them.
What am I reading?
I've done that where I've reread...
Is it the back of a cereal box?
No, I've reread the same paragraph like 3 times because I have no idea what they're trying to say. Like, there's a fight scene or something, you don't know what's happening, you don't know why it's happening, or they word it in such a way that you're confused as to what's happening. Clarity matters. Writing is communicating with words, communicating ideas and feelings, and if you can't do that clearly, your readers aren't going to know what's going on. So yeah, you have to be clear. Clarity, clarity, clarity.
So, unlike Stila, my number one thing when I'm editing line by line is rhythm. I want to make sure the pacing is fast when I want it to be fast, slow when I want it to be slow, and I want to make each sentence and paragraph lockstep with the other one. I want them fitting together like dovetail... Doves? Do doves fit together? They're like dove tails.
Do you know where dovetailing comes from?
From doves.
I've watched This Old House. I know.
So, the examples we're going to show you for me...
Is it the new Yankee Workshop?
As far as Love It or Listed.
No, definitely not there.
The examples I'm going to show you for me are making each paragraph fit into the next one. That's what I'm looking for when I go line by line.
They don't dovetail in Canada.
So what's a example of clarity?
While I was editing the first chapter, I had some people read it.
Of Catcalled.
Of Catcalled.
Rawr.
Chapter 1. So in the scene, a co-worker of Brea's is very smug about the fact that something at work is going to happen. So she's really smug. She's won a victory of sorts.
We already know they're cat people.
Yes.
They're meeting a coworker at the party for the first time.
Correct.
And this is how she's introduced.
Her eyes glinted chocolate fire and her smirk was slow and cat-like. I resisted the urge to check her for yellow feathers. The problem here is a lot of people didn't understand what I was trying to say with this. It was too clever for its own good.
I didn't understand what you were trying to say with this. What were you trying to say?
Nobody was trying to say. It's the cat who got the canary. She's smiling like she's gotten into the cream and, she's checking for canary feathers type of thing. But it was too cutesy and nobody got it.
But it's a metaphor.
It's so metaphorical.
In a world where cat shifters do exist, we already know.
Yeah.
So the problem was, does she actually have feathers? Is she a cat person?
Yeah.
So
there were a lot of little problems. It was too cute for its own good.
So what did you do?
I just took it out. I just took that line out entirely. It didn't work. It ruined the clarity of the moment. All right, you yell at that guy, though.
Yes.
That's what you do.
Just a dude yelling at another dude. All right, so for mine, this is a scene from Infinity Squad 3. It's coming after the stuff we talked about last week when the virus is spreading, and they're going through and they're kind of trying to take everyone who has the virus and put them in quarantine. And so the things I'm looking for here, I'll just read it off. Wait for the drug deal to drive away. Okay.
All right, it's done.
3 booming knocks on the housing unit's closed metal door. Open up. Quarantine enforcement unit, I said into my throat mic. We're here on the authority of the mayor. No, go away, the ape father yelled back through the door. We're all okay here. Sir, we need to come inside. No, you're not taking us. The first few family visits had gone smoothly. But after 5, 10, 15 roundups in the last 24 hours, word had spread on Beantown social media. Now everyone knew what an armored trooper knocking on their door meant. The thing I'm looking for when I'm editing this is, does each thing they say, does each line of dialogue lead to the next? You can see that what Anne-Marie says into her throat mic makes the ape father say, no, go away, we're all okay.
Yeah.
Then she needs to retort, he needs to say something, and once you've built up the momentum of the scene, again, rhythm, once the scene's kind of going, then I go back and do a little flashback, or a little info dump, exposition. The first few family visits have gone smoothly, right? Then you're doing a little exposition. I don't do that at the beginning, because that's like trying to move a car out of park in 3rd gear. So I kick it off with dialogue, action, rhythm, make sure each line interlocks with the other, and then go into a little exposition.
Yeah, get the reader invested in what's happening in that scene before you explain to them the meaning behind it or any of the extraneous information.
Alright, so keep going on. Oh, here's another lockstep example. To set this scene up, they're in power armor, one of the youngest privates, they're in a riot, and a brick was flying, a huge cinder block was flying at the captain's head, the main character's head, and one of the privates, used their power armor to like punch it out of the air and save her, from being hit in the head with a brick. Which wouldn't have killed her, but might have done something. Might have given her a concussion. So, here's the scene. You punched a brick out of the air. Juan's statement was more of a question. Pressman blushed a little behind his faceplate before answering. I mean, sort of. We were in the shuttle heading up to orbit again. 5 soldiers jammed in there like too many action figures inside a kid's lunchbox. You punched a brick out of the air. It was coming right for the captain's head. Why didn't you just push her out of the way? Juan asked. Or use your body to shield her, Preacher asked. What would have happened if you had missed? Splat, Malik grunted as he sharpened his already sharpened knife. I didn't really have time to think about it, and shooting my rifle wouldn't have helped, so I just pulled back and punched it into dust. Into dust. Now Juan's statement was even more of a question. Okay, so I'll stop there, but this is what I mean by lockstep. You punched a brick out of the air was what Juan was saying. Juan's statement was more of a question, was what the narrator thought of it. That led to Pressman, the private, blushing and replying. One exposition sentence, which could have been 2 or 3. That's the only wiggle room you have.
Yep.
But then, sort of, led to Juan being more incredulous, the reply,
You punched a brick out of the air?
Yeah. Right? And so if I wanted to put in a description of what they're wearing or something else, the only chance I have is in this one little paragraph here. Everything else leads to the other thing.
Well, and the problem is if you make that paragraph too big, you've lost the punch of the dialogue.
Yeah.
Sometimes most of the times when you have dialogue, there's a rhythm itself to the dialogue. And anything you put in between the dialogue tags, any action, description, thought, needs to be fairly short, or you risk losing the thread of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is something that's a big problem in my writing and this is why you leave this part of editing to the end.
Yeah.
After I go through and dovetail all this stuff, it's very hard to put in extra scenes, extra people, extra actions, because if you break one link, then the rhythm is lost. And I want to point out one more thing that you're looking for in these line-to-line edits. When did you go ooh each time?
The last line.
Right. So, pro tip number 1. Oh, I was going to hit the horn, but there's people in front of us. I don't want to hit the horn.
Yeah.
Pro tip is, the end of a thing is the most powerful of the thing.
Yeah.
That's a bad pro tip. The end of the paragraph or sentence is the most powerful part. So if you have a great line, a great stinger, you're going to put it at the end of the paragraph. So look what we did here. First exposition paragraph. Now everyone knew what an armored trooper knocking on their door meant. That's the powerful line. That's the summary line. Goes at the end. Second expositional paragraph. And no sick ape who went to that quarantine wing ever came out.
Ooh.
Right? That's, again, the powerful line. You put those at the end. So when I'm going through line-by-line edits, I'm making sure each sentence, if I wanted to have punch, it has the punch at the end.
Yep.
Each paragraph has the punch at the end.
Yep.
You can all talk about that if you want.
I agree. The other main goal I have when I'm...
You can keep going.
The other main goal I have when I'm editing line by line and paragraph by paragraph is to keep the mood, A, the way I want it, and consistent with the scene. Because my own personal mood can change the mood of what I'm writing, so I have to go back through and make sure that it's all consistent with what's happening in each scene.
Because the danger is the mood you were in when you... It's a legal street drag race going on in front of us.
Apparently.
The danger is the mood you were in when you wrote the piece is not the mood you're in when you're editing the piece. So if you were sad when you wrote it and happy when you're editing it, that could ruin things. So you want to make sure you as a human, that you as an author, are in the same mood each time. So what do we use for that?
Music. Normally, if I'm having trouble getting into the mood I want, then I go searching through my music selections until I find a couple of songs or even one song. I have been known to loop a single song for half an hour to an hour while I'm writing a specific scene to keep me in exactly that frame of mind in order to write it efficiently. Sometimes it's a whole playlist of songs. When I write science fiction, I tend to like to use the old Ghost in the Shell music from Standalone Complex. That's a great one. I like using Battlestar Galactica music for sci-fi because it gets me in that greedy science fiction mood. So,
What have you been using recently for your fight scenes?
what's the whole name of the movie? Minnie. The King Arthur soundtrack.
Yeah, the recent King Arthur soundtrack.
That movie's so good.
All right, so we've had a couple YouTube comments saying stop using current movies as your examples, so that's perfectly fine. So in last week's Game of Thrones, when the Night King threw the spear and so you use music each time to get yourself in the right mood.
Not each time. Only when I'm having trouble with it, if there's a specific mood that I'm trying to evoke that I don't normally feel myself, then I will use that.
Yeah. So, one good thing in this line-by-line edit, I kind of look at this a little bit, I go for tone instead of mood, but you're looking at how your character's reacting in a scene, how many jokes you're making, and you want that consistent in a scene.
Yeah, you have to adjust each scene to the mood that it's supposed to be in order to make it believable.
So when I'm worrying about mood or tone, I usually look at description. Mm-hmm. So if you have things, go back. If you have things that are slow, flowery, long descriptions of scenes, the sun was setting, there was dew on the grass, and that tends to be a more somber, reflective tone.
Yep. Whereas
I dial up the dialogue and action if I want to be a more fast-paced mood or tone. Minnie. Orange Minnie.
Ooh,
Orange Minnie.
Orange Minnie.
But, okay, looking back at this paragraph, I want to go into our second pro tip.
Chill.
What is bugging me, if you look at this paragraph, as I was reading it, there's one thing that's super, super bugging me. Do you know, you probably even heard it in my voice when I read it.
Well, what I don't like is the asked. The second asked.
Right,
that
exactly.
Bugs me.
So this is pro tip number 2. So the thing that really bugged me is, why didn't you just push her out of the way, Juan asked, or use your body to shield her, Preacher asked?
Yeah, that bugs me.
A lot of authors do this, and not a lot of authors are really cognizant about it, but when you're going through word by word, look for, if you want to make your book more interesting and speed things up, look for repeated words. Even something as simple as saying, said,
Yep.
is wasted.
Yeah, we've mentioned it before. Repeating people's names too often, starting sentences with the same word over and over and over again. She said, she did, she. You want to vary that up a little bit. If you're going to have repetition in a scene, it needs to serve a very distinct purpose. You need to have it there on purpose. You need to know why you have it there and what effect you're trying to garner. That's why you would use anything repeating. So, yeah, when you're reading, I'm like, oh, said.
Or asked.
I'm like, yeah, asked. I'm just like, ugh, asked again. I'd be like, Preacher added.
Okay, so here's an example of how I go through and do that, right? This is a scene where after they fired the private who punched a brick out of the air, later on, he fired his gun accidentally at a family who they were trying to get out. The family was kind of fighting back, and he got flustered, and they fought him with a big giant robot, and he accidentally fired his gun at him. But it was a non-lethal gun, firing foam bullets, right? So this is the mayor giving Anne-Marie shit about that later on. The rest of the day had no attack incidents, just a lot of whining. And one of your soldiers fired on a civilian house, the mayor said, using foam. But if he had used his other gun, someone could have gotten killed, in the house, or on the street. And that's why we didn't let Pressman have real bullets. Right, so I only say the word bullets at the end. This is what this scene could look like. And one of your soldiers fired bullets at the civilian house, using foam bullets. But if he used his metal bullets, someone could have gotten killed in the house or gotten a bullet on the street. And that's why we didn't let Pressman have real bullets. Right, how would the scene be if it was like that?
Annoying.
Yeah, it'd be super annoying. That's an extreme example, but even when my characters are in an elevator, I say things like, we stepped into the carriage, we closed the doors, we were inside the small space, and then finally at the end I say, we stepped out of the elevator. I don't try to use the word elevator over again.
Yeah, you try to limit that as much as possible.
Yeah.
And a lot of times this is where your beta readers come in. They're the ones who are going to pick some of this repetition out for you.
Yeah, using Control Find doesn't really do this very well.
No, it doesn't help.
Because you can't tell how close they are to each other. It's the closeness of the repeated words that makes your story watered down. What do? You had an interesting thing about this.
Did I?
Yeah.
Yes. One of my big pet peeves is, and we've heard this before, is a repetition of names, especially in dialogue, but I hate hearing people's names 50 times.
Like what? Like, give an example. Nothing to see here.
They love their motorcycles this time of year.
It's a biker gang.
Good lord, what is this?
that?
Everything on... It's just an empty dolly.
Can't you see we're trying to film here?
I know, right? Jeez, guys, go home with that noise.
What happens is, Mark opened the door. It was his wife. Mark, what are you doing inside?
Oh,
Mark thought about it. Like, that stuff happens a lot, where someone says their name, and then the narration says their name. Those are often too close.
Yep.
So what do you do to fix that in your cat cult?
I use euphemisms a lot. I usually mix it up by using their names, but also having Brea specifically say my sister or my twin, and just kind of move it around like that.
Well, Bella, my sister, my twin.
Right, Bella, my sister, my twin. That gives me three different things to use to describe who she's talking about without reusing Bella 50 million times.
Yeah, it's just like the elevator thing. If I have the mayor, I'll say the mayor, I'll say the older ape, I'll say, the politician looked at me, just so I don't have to say the mayor.
Yeah.
So as you're going through line by line, look for repeated words. You kind of can only tell this if you're reading them out loud.
Yeah.
Like that asked thing, I didn't notice until I read it out loud.
Oh, I know, yeah. As soon as I'm like, oh.
Yeah, so Patrick Rothfuss says, some people say, I do 7 passes in my book, I do 8, and Patrick Rothfuss just laughs. He's like, he does 100.
Yeah.
So you're editing for big things, but one of your passes should be reading the scenes out loud, and you catch stuff like repeated words. You also catch rhythm. The best way to catch failures of rhythm is to read your scene out loud.
Another thing it does really well is it helps you catch oddly worded sentences, weirdly structured things that are out of order. Sometimes when you're reading, if you're tripping over it and you can't read it easily, your reader's probably tripping over it mentally when they read it. So they're not really understanding it, having to read it 3 times.
I didn't realize until we started doing these videos that in Infinity Squad 3, the planet is called Cygnus, and they're there to treat a virus. And so I say the phrase Cygnus virus a lot.
Oof.
And I didn't realize until reading it out loud for these videos, I was like, that's probably not a good phrase to say. Cygnus virus, Cygnus virus.
Cygnus virus.
Cygnus virus.
Cygnus virus.
Cygnus virus.
Cygnus virus.
See, it doesn't mean
I just
anything.
said Cygnus fires.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
No,
so
yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to fix that. I might change the name of the planet, but
And yeah.
But I didn't. The point is, I didn't realize it until I read it out loud.
So pro tip number 3.
3.
One episode. Yay! Check all your names. I know we've gone through, and a lot of people spend a lot of times carefully choosing names. Make sure they aren't too close to each other. Now, I have a tricky situation with Bella and Brea because they're twins, and it makes sense that they would have very similar names. But like I said before, that's one of the reasons why I have it in first person and why I break it up with my twin and my sister, to try to keep them a little bit separate.
Right, but Check your names for what?
Check your names to make sure that, like he was saying with Cygnus Virus, that they don't all sound the same. That you don't have like 3 guys that sound very similar.
We realized we both do this. In a sci-fi or fantasy book, people have weird names.
Oh yeah, so much.
And typically, if the name's weird enough, I just remember it by the first letter.
Yep.
Like, oh, that's the alien with the name that starts with B.
Yep. B said.
We've been interrupted by all sorts of transportation.
I know.
This is the 4th mode of transportation that has interrupted the video. So if you have an alien name that begins with B, and it's a long name, you can't have another alien that begins with B that's a long name.
Ligurian Linen.
And then Belovian. Like, no, it's got to be a B name.
Yeah.
And then
a C name.
And then a J name, right?
And
then
R name.
An R name with an asterisk,
Yeah.
right? Don't have a bunch of B names in your book if it's fantasy sci-fi. So that's a problem, I think, with Bella Brea. I think they're too close.
They are too close, which is why I try to break them up as much as I can.
I mean, I would change one of the names, but yeah.
One of the things I do to get away from that is to make sure that they're not said too close to each other. Like, I try not to put them both in the same sentence or too close to each other, period. I think in this instance it's okay because the names are very short.
I mean, if it was Brie and Beethoven, so again, the reason I'm saying this is visually on the page, they tend to blur. Because they're both B names that end in a vowel that are pretty short.
Yep.
If one was Brie and one was Beethoven, visually on the page they would be distinct.
They do look a little different though because of the Y.
They look a little different.
They look a little I know. I'm breaking my own rule here,
yeah.
but the reason I think I can get away with it is because the names are so short. That's the problem when you run into the very, very long fantasy names. If they don't have a nickname of some sort that makes it easy to say or easy to remember, you're going to run into problems.
If you have like 2 alien races and one's like Silithrians and one's Sycophanthians, they're both long S names.
Yep.
And even if one's a reptile and one's a sentient rock, they're going to blend together.
Right, the names themselves are too close and too long. So there's one long, one short.
Yeah. So this to me is what people think about when they say editing. Is going through line by line and finding... Yeah. And it's very important, it's very fun, but you can get sucked into the quagmire of this.
Yeah.
So this should be one of the final steps when you're polishing a scene. So I spend a lot of time doing it, but make sure you can have time to do this for every major scene in the book. So I would say at the very minimum, your very first page and your first chapter should be polished to a fine shine.
Yep.
Page 100 doesn't need to be as good as of page 1.
Nope.
Your last page, whatever your big resolution is, should be polished to a fine. Every line should lockstep. It should be super clear. Big character turning points. Probably the beginning and ends of chapters.
Yeah, that's your process pretty much. Yeah.
Well, but I'm saying if they don't have time before the end of the year,
yeah.
At the very minimum, if you have to time...
Make sure the important parts are very well polished.
Yeah, if you have the time budget, I would spend... You can do 10 passes, 20 passes on your first page, and maybe 3 passes on a middle, chapter 5 page or something.
Yeah.
Is how I would break it up.
So what I've been doing, I just finished editing chapter 3 at this point, is I try to do each chapter, because they're almost scenes unto themselves as well. I go through that now that I've got my main plot done, and I make sure that the plot line in that chapter's solid. I make sure that the scene can hold itself. I see what characters are in it. I fix all that, and then I go while I'm going over it that last time before I put it up on Scrib to have people critique it, I do the polishing. Not too much, but I try to make it as clean as I can before I have other people read it. Right now, I'm trying to do 2 chapters a week to get it done. Editing, 2 chapters. And that's with some polish on it. And then that'll give me enough time to make any changes I need to make at the end and to do that last polish. Minnie, do that last polishing pass. It's a black one right there. Ooh. Yeah, it's a nice color for it.
Next week, we're going to talk about foreshadowing, callback. It's a kind of a bigger look, but, this is the elbow grease. This is like, going through and making your book good. This is the process. I wish we could have shown the first draft of your chapter versus the last draft.
These 4 episodes of editing, this is just the basic stuff. This is the order you do it in. These are the things you concentrate on, or that we concentrate on, that should be gone over. And we'll go into more detail on some of this stuff as we go through. But this gives you the basics. So if you don't watch any of those others, but you just do the stuff in these 4 to edit, you'll still come out with something decent.
So your homework this week is to take one of your most important chapters, probably your first page, maybe your first chapter, and polish it to a mirror's shine. Look for lock steps, look for repeated words, look for clarity, and then ask yourself, do I want to make the rest of my book like this?
Do you have time to do this with everything else? How long did this take?
Yep.
Get editing. .mini. Oh, he jumped the barrier. He's going for it. Does Danny guy not know he's there? Like, is this a chance meeting?
Are
they trying to find each other? Like, this parking lot's not that big.
Just a Tinder hookup, Kitty. Just a Tinder hookup.
It could be. It's two dudes.
That'd be Grinder.
Oh, that's right. I can't keep it straight.
And then if it's two girls, it'd be Scissor.